My husband cheated on me, so I left him and married the CEO who loved me deeply. I never thought my life would become a cautionary tale about trusting the wrong person. My name is Sarah, and I'm 32 years old. For 5 years, I was married to David, a man I believed was my soulmate. We met in college, dated for 3 years, and married in what I thought was a fairy tale wedding. David worked as a sales manager at a mid-sized tech company, and I was a marketing coordinator at a prestigious consulting firm downtown. We had dreams of buying a house, starting a family, building something real together. David was charming, funny, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only woman in the world when he looked at me. He would surprise me with flowers, write little notes in my lunch, and tell me constantly how lucky he was to have me. I thought we were happy. I thought we were solid. I was wrong. The first red flag should have been his sudden interest in working late. David had never been the type to stay past 5:30, but suddenly he was coming home at 8, 9, sometimes 10 o'clock. When I asked about it, he would roll his eyes and complain about his demanding boss, about new projects, about the pressure to meet targets. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because I loved him. The second red flag was his phone. David had always been casual about his phone, leaving it on the counter, asking me to check messages when he was driving. But suddenly it was glued to his hand. He would take it to the bathroom, sleep with it under his pillow, and get visibly nervous when it buzzed around me. When I mentioned it, he laughed it off, saying work was just more demanding these days. But it was the third red flag that should have made me run. David started criticizing me in small, cutting ways. My cooking wasn't as good as his mother's. My hair looked better when I wore it down. Maybe I should hit the gym more often. These comments were always delivered with a smile, disguised as helpful suggestions, but they left marks. I found myself second-guessing everything, trying harder to be the wife he apparently wanted. I was so focused on being perfect for him that I almost missed the most obvious sign of all. David had started smelling different when he came home from work. Not just cologne, but a different shampoo, a different soap. When I mentioned it, he said the gym at work had changed brands. Another lie I swallowed whole. The truth came crashing down on a Tuesday evening in March. David had texted me saying he would be working late again, that I shouldn't wait up. I decided to surprise him by bringing dinner to his office. I knew the building well. I had picked him up there dozens of times. I walked through the lobby with a bag of his favorite Thai food, took the elevator to the 7th floor, and headed toward his cubicle. The floor was empty, completely empty. The cleaning crew told me that everyone had left by 6:30. David's computer was off, his chair pushed in, his desk cleared. He hadn't been there for hours. I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at my phone, trying to process what I had just discovered. My husband had lied to me. But where was he? And why? The rational part of my mind tried to come up with innocent explanations. Maybe he had gone to a client dinner he forgot to mention. Maybe he was at a different location. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. But deep down, in the part of my heart that I had been trying to ignore for months, I knew the truth. David was cheating on me. I drove home slowly, my mind racing. When I walked into our apartment, I felt like I was seeing it for the first time. The photos of us on the walls, the furniture we had picked out together, the life we had built. It all felt like a lie now. I sat on our couch, the Thai food growing cold beside me, and waited. David came home at 10:15, his tie slightly loose, his hair a little messier than usual. He kissed my forehead and apologized for being so late, spinning some story about a last-minute client emergency. I looked into his eyes, the same eyes that used to make me feel safe, and saw nothing but lies. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out the truth, and I was going to do it quietly, methodically. If David wanted to play games, I would learn the rules. But unlike him, when I played to win. I spent the next 2 weeks living in a strange, suspended reality. During the day, I went to work at the consulting firm, attending meetings, writing reports, smiling at colleagues. But inside, I was conducting an investigation that would have made a private detective proud. I had transformed from a trusting wife into a woman with a mission, uncovering the truth about my marriage. My first move was his phone. David was careful with it, but everyone makes mistakes. When he was in the shower one morning, his phone buzzed with a text message. The preview showed on the lock screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Miss you already." The sender was listed as Mike from accounting. I knew every person David worked with. There was no Mike in accounting. There was, however, a Michelle in accounting. A 24-year-old blonde with a bright smile and a reputation for dating older married men. I had met her at the company Christmas party, had even complimented her dress. The irony wasn't lost on me. Armed with this information, I began watching David's patterns more carefully. The late nights always fell on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He would shower immediately when he got home, always claiming he had been to the gym. His laundry smelled like perfume, not sweat. When I casually mentioned Michelle's name one evening, asking how she was doing, David's face went pale for just a moment before he claimed he barely knew her. The evidence was mounting, but I needed something concrete, something undeniable. I considered hiring a private investigator, but I realized I was better positioned than anyone to gather the proof I needed. After all, I knew David's habits, his schedule, his weaknesses better than anyone. My opportunity came when David announced he would be working late on a Thursday, saying he had to finish a presentation for an important client meeting the next morning. I told him I understood, kissed him goodbye, and wished him luck. Then I called in sick to work and spent the day preparing for my own presentation. At 6 o'clock, I drove to David's office building. I parked across the street and waited. Sure enough, at 6:20, David walked out of the building with Michelle. They weren't just walking together. They were holding hands, laughing, completely comfortable with each other. This wasn't a new affair. This was a relationship. I followed them at a distance as they drove to a small Italian restaurant downtown. Through the window, I watched them share a bottle of wine, saw David reach across the table to touch her face the same way he used to touch mine. I took photos with my phone, my hands surprisingly steady despite the storm raging in my chest. But the real dagger came when they left the restaurant. Instead of going their separate ways, they walked to a nearby hotel. Not a cheap motel, but a nice place, the kind where you could check in online and avoid the front desk altogether. The kind of place that suggested this was routine, planned, ongoing. I sat in my car outside that hotel for 2 hours, watching the lit window of what I assumed was their room. I thought about marching up there, confronting them, making a scene. But I didn't. Instead, I drove home, put David's dinner in the refrigerator, and went to bed. When David came home at 11:30, he slipped into bed beside me, probably thinking I was asleep. He smelled like her perfume, like betrayal, like the end of everything I thought we had. He whispered, "Sorry I'm so late, baby." The presentation ran longer than expected. I lay there in the dark, listening to him lie to me, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about respect, about the deliberate destruction of our marriage, about the fact that David had looked me in the eye every day for months and lied without flinching. The next morning, David left for work with a spring in his step, probably thinking about his afternoon with Michelle. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway. Then I got up and began the next phase of my plan. I wasn't going to confront David with tears and accusations. I wasn't going to beg him to choose me over her. I was going to do something he would never see coming. I was going to take control of my own life, and I was going to make sure that when the dust settled, I would be the one standing tall. The moment I truly understood the depth of David's betrayal came 3 days later, and it wasn't what I expected. I had been preparing myself for the confrontation, gathering evidence, planning my next moves. But sometimes life has a way of accelerating your timeline in the most brutal way possible. I was at work when my phone rang. It was my doctor's office, calling with the results of my annual physical. The nurse's voice was professional, but concerned as she explained that my STD screening had come back positive for chlamydia. She was calling to discuss treatment options and to advise me that my sexual partner needed to be tested and treated as well. I hung up the phone and sat in my office, staring at the wall, as the full weight of David's betrayal crashed over me. It wasn't just emotional anymore. It wasn't just about broken promises and violated trust. He had put my health at risk. He had brought home diseases from his affair, exposing me to God knows what, without my knowledge or consent. The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I called my doctor back immediately and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. I also scheduled an appointment with a divorce attorney for the next day. I was done gathering evidence. I was done being the victim of David's selfishness. The war was about to begin, and I intended to win it decisively. That evening, David came home at his usual time, acting like the devoted husband he had never actually been. He asked about my day, complained about his boss, and suggested we order pizza for dinner. I watched him perform this charade, knowing what I now knew, and felt nothing but cold contempt. "How was your day?" I asked, my voice perfectly normal. "Oh, same old stuff. Boring meetings, demanding clients. Michelle in accounting is leaving next week, so we're all scrambling to cover her projects." The lie came so easily to him. He wasn't just cheating. He was already planning Michelle's exit strategy, probably so they could continue their relationship without the complication of working together. The calculation of it, the premeditation, made everything so much worse. "That's too bad," I said. "She seemed nice when I met her at the Christmas party." David shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Yeah, she's okay. Anyway, I might have to work late a few more times this week to get everything sorted out." More lies, more excuses to spend time with her. I nodded and smiled, playing the understanding wife one last time. That night, after David fell asleep, I sat at my laptop and began documenting everything I knew. The dates, the times, the lies, the health consequences. I organized the photos I had taken, the phone records I had copied, the evidence of his deception. I was building a case, not just for my divorce attorney, but for my own closure. I needed to see it all laid out, in black and white, to fully understand how completely I had been betrayed. But as I worked, something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Sarah, this is Michael Richardson from Richardson & Associates. I know this might seem strange, but I need to speak with you about something important. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow?" Michael Richardson. I knew that name. He was the CEO of the consulting firm that had been trying to poach me for the past 6 months. I had turned down their offers twice, partly because I was comfortable where I was, but mostly because David had convinced me that taking a new job would put too much stress on our marriage. Another manipulation I was only now beginning to see clearly. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Tomorrow works. What time?" The response came immediately. 10 a.m., Corner Cafe on 5th Street. And Sarah, I know you're going through something difficult right now. I want you to know that you have options. I set down my phone, my heart racing. How did Michael Richardson know I was going through something difficult? Had word gotten out somehow? Or was this just coincidence? Perfect timing in the universe's plan to give me exactly what I needed when I needed it most? As I sat there in the dark, listening to my cheating husband snore beside me, I realized that everything was about to change. The life I had been living, the marriage I had been fighting for, the future I had been planning. All of it was ending. But maybe, just maybe, something better was about to begin. I closed my laptop and finally went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I spent the hours until dawn, thinking about choices, about dignity, about the difference between being a victim and being a survivor. By the time the sun came up, I knew exactly what I was going to do. David's betrayal had broken me, but it had also freed me. And I was about to use that freedom in ways he would never see coming. The coffee shop on 5th Street was exactly the kind of place where life-changing conversations happened. Quiet corners, warm lighting, the gentle hum of people living their lives while yours hung in the balance. I arrived 10 minutes early, chose a table near the window, and waited for Michael Richardson to either offer me salvation or complicate my life even further. He walked in at exactly 10 o'clock, and I recognized him immediately. Tall, maybe 6'2", with graying hair at his temples, and the kind of confident stride that came from building something from nothing. Michael had founded Richardson & Associates 15 years ago and turned it into one of the most respected consulting firms in the city. He was successful, intelligent, and, according to industry gossip, recently divorced. "Sarah," he said, extending his hand as he approached my table. "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice." "Mr. Richardson," I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and lasted just a moment longer than necessary. "I have to admit, I'm curious about why you wanted to see me." He sat down across from me and signaled the waitress for coffee. "Please, call me Michael, and I'll be direct with you because I think you deserve honesty, especially right now." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean, especially right now?" Michael leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "I have a friend who works at St. Mary's Hospital. She mentioned that you came in yesterday for some medical test related to a situation that might involve infidelity. I know this is incredibly personal, and I apologize for the intrusion, but I wanted you to know that you don't have to face this alone." I felt the blood drain from my face. Not because I was embarrassed, but because someone, this man I barely knew, was offering me exactly what I needed most. Validation that I wasn't crazy, that what was happening to me mattered, that I deserved better. "How did you—" I started to ask, then stopped. It didn't matter how he knew. What mattered was what he was offering. "My ex-wife cheated on me," Michael said quietly. "For 2 years, she had an affair with my business partner. The health scare, the lies, the gaslighting. I know what you're going through. I also know that right now, you're probably feeling like your world is ending, but I'm here to tell you that it's not ending. It's just beginning." The waitress brought our coffee, and we sat in silence for a moment. I studied Michael's face, looking for signs of pity or manipulation, but I found neither. What I saw was understanding, compassion, and something else I couldn't quite identify. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked finally. "Because 6 months ago, when I first tried to recruit you, I did my research. You're brilliant, Sarah. You're innovative, hardworking, and you have instincts that can't be taught. But every time I made you an offer, you turned me down. Your husband convinced you that career advancement would hurt your marriage. I respected that decision, even though I thought it was a mistake." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You think David was holding me back on purpose?" "I think men like David are threatened by women like you. I think he knew that if you reached your full potential, you might realize you were settling for less than you deserved, in every aspect of your life." Michael reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. He slid it across the table to me. "This is a formal offer letter. Senior Vice President of Strategic Development. Starting salary is $180,000, plus bonuses, plus equity, full health benefits, flexible schedule, and a signing bonus of $50,000. I stared at the folder without opening it. The number he had just quoted was more than double what I was making at my current job. It was fuck you money. It was independence money. It was start-over money. There's no strings attached, Michael continued. This offer exists whether you take the job or not, whether you leave your husband or not, whether you ever speak to me again or not. But I want you to know that you have value, Sarah. You have worth beyond what anyone has told you, and you have choices. I opened the folder and scanned the offer letter. Everything he had said was there in black and white, along with details about the position that made my heart race with excitement. This wasn't just a job, it was a career. This wasn't just a paycheck, it was freedom. Why are you doing this? I asked, looking up at him. Because when my world fell apart, I had resources, connections, a safety net. You shouldn't have to rebuild your life from nothing just because someone else betrayed your trust. And honestly, he smiled. And for the first time since I had discovered David's affair, I felt something other than anger or sadness. Because I've been waiting for the right moment to convince you to come work with me. This might not be the moment I would have chosen, but it's the moment we have. I closed the folder and looked out the window at the busy street. People hurrying to meetings, to appointments, to lives they had chosen for themselves. For the first time in years, I felt like I could be one of them. I need to think about this, I said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Sarah? Michael reached across the table and briefly touched my hand. Whatever you decide about the job, whatever you decide about your marriage, remember that you're stronger than you know, and you deserve better than what you're getting. I drove home with the offer letter on my passenger seat, my mind spinning with possibilities. When I walked into my apartment, David was already there, sitting on the couch with his laptop, probably planning his next lie. Hey, baby, he said, not looking up from his screen. How was your doctor's appointment yesterday? Everything okay? The casual way he asked, like he was inquiring about the weather, told me everything I needed to know about how little he actually cared about my well-being. If he had been faithful, if he had been honest, that question would have been the first thing out of his mouth when he got home. Everything's fine, I said, which was both true and completely false. Everything was definitely not fine. But for the first time in months, I was starting to believe that everything was going to be okay. That night, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my divorce attorney, confirming our appointment and asking her to expedite the paperwork. The second was to Michael Richardson. I accept your offer, I told him. When do I start? Monday, if you're ready. And Sarah, you're making the right choice. All of them. As I hung up the phone, I realized that David's betrayal, as painful as it was, had actually been a gift. It had forced me to see that I had been settling for a life that was too small, a love that was conditional, a future that depended on someone else's approval. Now I was taking it all back. The war was about to begin, but I was no longer fighting just to save my marriage. I was fighting to save myself. Monday morning arrived with the clarity that comes from making decisions that align with your true self. I had spent the weekend in a strange state of calm preparation, like a general organizing troops before a decisive battle. David had no idea that anything had changed. He left for work that morning with a kiss on my cheek and a promise to try to be home by 7 for dinner. Another lie, of course, but this time I just smiled and told him to have a good day. Richardson and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower downtown, with views that stretched across the entire city. My new office was on the 32nd floor, with windows facing west, and a desk that was bigger than my old cubicle. Michael had introduced me to the team as their new senior vice president, and the respect in their eyes was something I hadn't experienced in years. These people saw me as an expert, a leader, someone whose opinions mattered. Your first assignment, Michael said as we stood in my office that afternoon, is to lead the Henderson Industries project. They're looking to restructure their entire consulting department, and they specifically requested our best strategic mind. That's you. Henderson Industries. I knew them well. They were one of the largest employers in the city, with contracts worth millions of dollars. This wasn't just a job. It was a career-defining opportunity. Michael, I said, as he was about to leave, I need you to know that I'm probably going to be dealing with some personal complications over the next few weeks. I don't want that to affect my work here. He turned back, his expression serious. Are you talking about your divorce? Among other things, I'm planning to file papers this week and David doesn't know yet. It could get messy. Michael closed the door behind him and sat down across from my desk. Sarah, I need to tell you something. When I offered you this job, it wasn't just because I believed in your professional abilities. I've been watching you for months, not in a creepy way, but in an admiring way. You're intelligent, compassionate, strong. When I found out what your husband was doing to you, it made me angry. Not just because infidelity is wrong, but because he was wasting something precious. I felt my heart start to race. Michael, I can't. I'm not asking you for anything, he said quickly. I'm not expecting anything. You're going through a divorce. You're starting a new job. Your whole life is changing. The last thing you need is pressure from me. But I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like the chance to show you what it feels like to be truly valued. I stared at him, this man who had appeared in my life at exactly the moment I needed him most. He wasn't pushing, wasn't demanding, wasn't trying to take advantage of my vulnerability. He was simply stating a truth and letting me decide what to do with it. Right now, I said carefully, I need to focus on ending one relationship before I can even think about beginning another. But Michael, thank you for the job, for the honesty, for treating me like I matter. You do matter, he said simply. Don't let anyone ever make you forget that again. That evening, I went home to the apartment I shared with David and began the final phase of my plan. I cooked his favorite dinner, lasagna with garlic bread, and opened a bottle of the wine we had been saving for our anniversary. When he walked in at 8:30, he found me sitting at our dining table, wearing the blue dress he always said looked good on me. Wow, he said, genuinely surprised. What's the occasion? I got some news today, I told him, gesturing for him to sit down. I wanted to share it with you. David sat down and accepted the glass of wine I poured for him. He was relaxed, happy, probably thinking about whatever story he was going to tell me about his day. He had no idea he was about to walk into an ambush. So what's the news? He asked, taking a large sip of wine. I got a new job, I said calmly. Senior Vice President at Richardson & Associates. The salary is $180,000 a year, plus bonuses. David nearly choked on his wine. What? Sarah, we talked about this. You can't just make major career decisions without discussing them with me first. What about our plans? What about starting a family? Our plans? I repeated, my voice still calm. You mean like the plan where you told me that advancing my career would hurt our marriage? The plan where you convinced me to turn down every opportunity that came my way? The plan where you sabotaged my confidence so I would stay small and manageable? David set down his wine glass, his face flushing. That's not. Sarah, what's gotten into you? You're talking crazy. Am I? I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope. I slid it across the table to him. Open it. Inside the envelope were copies of all the evidence I had gathered. The photos of him with Michelle at the restaurant and entering the hotel. Screenshots of their text messages. Credit card statements showing charges at jewelry stores and expensive restaurants on dates when he had told me he was working late. A complete record of his affair, documented and undeniable. David's face went white as he flipped through the pages. Sarah, I can explain. No, I said, cutting him off. You can't explain. You can't explain why you put my health at risk. You can't explain why you lied to me every single day for months. You can't explain why you tried to hold back my career while you were betraying everything we built together." I reached into my purse again and pulled out another envelope. "These are divorce papers. I'm filing them tomorrow morning. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live." David stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "Sarah, please. We can work through this. I made a mistake, but I love you. I want to save our marriage." "You love me?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "David, you don't even know me. The woman you married was someone I pretended to be because I thought that's what you wanted. The real me is someone who doesn't tolerate disrespect. The real me has ambition and standards and self-worth. The real me deserves better than what you gave me." I stood up from the table, leaving the carefully prepared dinner untouched. "I'm staying at a hotel tonight. When I come back tomorrow, I expect you to be gone. We'll communicate through lawyers from now on." "Sarah, wait!" David called out as I headed for the door. "What about Michelle? What are you going to do about Michelle?" I turned back to look at him one last time. "What about her? She can have you, David, but she should know that she's getting a man who lies to the people he claims to love, who cheats without remorse, and who will probably do the same thing to her eventually. Consider that my wedding gift to you both." I walked out of that apartment and into the rest of my life, leaving David sitting alone with the ruins of the reality he had constructed through lies and manipulation. As I drove to the hotel, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The war was over, and I had won not by destroying David, but by saving myself. 3 months later, I was thriving in my new position, leading projects worth millions of dollars and earning the respect of colleagues who saw me as an equal. David and Michelle had moved in together, but according to mutual friends, their relationship was already showing cracks. Apparently, when the excitement of sneaking around ended, they discovered they didn't actually have much in common. Michael and I had been taking things slowly, building a friendship based on mutual respect and shared values. He never pressured me for more than I was ready to give, never made me feel like I owed him anything for the opportunities he had provided. When I was finally ready to explore something deeper, it would be because I chose it, not because I needed it. The best revenge against someone who tries to make you small is becoming larger than they ever imagined you could be. David had underestimated me, had tried to keep me contained and controlled, but his betrayal had actually set me free to become the person I was always meant to be. And that person was magnificent. 6 months after that confrontation over dinner, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The woman who had once begged for scraps of attention from a cheating husband was now commanding boardrooms, closing million-dollar deals, and dating a man who treated her like a queen. Michael and I had officially been together for 2 months, though our relationship had been building slowly since that first coffee meeting. He never once tried to rush me or take advantage of my vulnerability. Instead, he showed me every day what it looked like to be with someone who valued my mind, respected my independence, and celebrated my success, rather than feeling threatened by it. Our first real date had been to a charity gala for the Children's Hospital, an event that David would have complained about attending. Michael, on the other hand, had bought a table and invited me to be his guest. I wore a black evening gown that I had never had occasion to wear during my marriage, and when Michael saw me, the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know about the difference between being tolerated and being treasured. "You look absolutely stunning," he had said, offering me his arm. "But more importantly, you look happy." And I was happy. For the first time in years, I was genuinely, authentically happy. Not the forced cheerfulness of a woman trying to hold together a failing marriage, but the deep contentment of someone living in alignment with her true self. The divorce had been finalized the week before, with David receiving far less than he had expected. My lawyer had used the evidence of his affair to ensure that I kept the apartment, the savings account, and most of our shared assets. David had tried to argue that he deserved half of everything, but it's hard to make that case when you've been systematically betraying your spouse for months. The final blow to David's pride had come when he discovered that Michelle was pregnant. not with his child, as it turned out, but with the child of her previous affair partner, a married man she had been seeing before she started pursuing David. The timing of her pregnancy announcement had been calculated to trap David into a committed relationship, but a paternity test had revealed the truth. David called me 3 weeks ago, drunk and sobbing, begging me to take him back. He said Michelle had left him for her baby's real father, that he had lost his job because the company had discovered he was using work computers to coordinate his affair, and that he realized he had thrown away the best thing in his life. I listened to his confession with the detached interest of someone observing a car accident. When he finished his plea, I said simply, "David, I'm getting married next month. I wanted you to hear it from me, rather than through mutual friends." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Finally, he whispered, "Married? To who?" "To a man who saw my worth before I was even available," I replied. "To someone who celebrated my ambition instead of trying to diminish it. To a person who treats me like a partner instead of a possession." "Sarah, please," David had begged. "I know I made mistakes, but we were together for 5 years. That has to count for something." "It does count for something," I told him. "It taught me exactly what I don't want in a relationship. Thank you for that lesson, David. It led me to something infinitely better." Now, as I sat in my office reviewing the final details for the Henderson Industries merger I had orchestrated, a deal that would earn the firm $12 million in fees, I thought about the different versions of myself I had been. The insecure woman who had shrunk herself to fit into David's limited vision. The broken woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal. The angry woman who had planned her revenge. And finally, this woman. Confident, successful, loved, and free. Michael knocked on my office door and entered with a smile that still made my heart race. "How's the bride-to-be?" he asked, leaning down to kiss my forehead. "Busy closing the biggest deal of my career," I replied, gesturing to the contracts spread across my desk. "And excited about marrying the most wonderful man I've ever met." Our wedding was scheduled for next Saturday, a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens with close friends and family, nothing like the elaborate affair I had planned with David, which in retrospect had been more about impressing other people than celebrating our love. This wedding would be about 2 people choosing each other from a place of strength and authenticity rather than need and insecurity. "I have a surprise for you," Michael said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "I wasn't sure if I should show you this, but I think you deserve to know." Inside the envelope was a newspaper clipping from the business section. The headline read, "Local tech company executive charged with embezzlement." Below it was a photo of David being led away in handcuffs. According to the article, David had been stealing money from his company for months, using corporate credit cards for personal expenses and falsifying expense reports. The investigation had been triggered by his affair. When the company had reviewed his computer usage, they had discovered not only his inappropriate relationship with Michelle, but also evidence of financial fraud. "He's looking at 5 to 7 years in prison," Michael said quietly. "Sarah, I want you to know that I had nothing to do with this. I never contacted his company or shared any information about him. This was his own doing." I stared at the article, feeling a complex mix of emotions. I wasn't happy that David was facing prison time, but I wasn't sad either. More than anything, I felt validated. The man who had tried to convince me I was unstable, jealous, and paranoid had been living a life built entirely on lies and theft. "I believe you," I told Michael. "And honestly, I'm not surprised. A man who could lie to his wife every day for months was probably capable of lying to anyone about anything." I folded the article and put it in my desk drawer. David's downfall was complete, but it wasn't my victory. My victory was the life I had built without him. The career I had claimed, the love I had found, the woman I had become. "Any regrets?" Michael asked, sitting on the edge of my desk. "About David? None. About the affair? None. About the divorce? None. I stood up and wrapped my arms around his neck. The only thing I regret is not believing in myself sooner. But I suppose I needed to go through all of that to end up here, with you. I love you, Sarah Richardson, he said, using the name I would officially take in 6 days. I love you too, I replied, and I love the woman I've become. The woman who refuses to settle for less than she deserves ever again. As I looked out my office window at the city spread below us, I realized that David's betrayal had been the catalyst for the best thing that ever happened to me. He had forced me to confront the truth about our relationship, about my own worth, about what I was willing to accept. In trying to keep me small, he had inadvertently set me free to become everything I was meant to be. The wedding was perfect, small, intimate, and filled with people who genuinely celebrated our happiness. My sister served as my maid of honor, and Michael's best friend from college was his best man. But the moment that meant the most to me was when Michael's 8-year-old daughter from his first marriage, Emma, walked down the aisle as our flower girl. Emma had been hesitant about her father remarrying at first, protective of their close relationship, and worried that a new wife might change everything. But over the months of careful courtship, I had earned her trust by never trying to replace her mother, never competing for Michael's attention, and always treating her as an important part of our family unit. Sarah, she had said to me the night before the wedding, I'm glad Daddy found you. You make him smile the way he used to before Mommy left. Standing at the altar, watching this little girl scatter rose petals with such serious concentration, I realized that I wasn't just gaining a husband. I was gaining a family, a real family built on honesty, respect, and genuine love. The reception was held at Michael's house, our house now, a beautiful colonial in the suburbs with a garden that Emma and I had spent weekends planting together. As I danced with my new husband while his daughter giggled and tried to cut in, I thought about the different paths that had led us all to this moment. 3 months after our wedding, I received an unexpected letter. It was from David, postmarked from the federal correctional facility where he was serving his sentence. My first instinct was to throw it away unread, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was different from his previous desperate attempts to contact me. There was no begging, no manipulation, no attempts to rewrite history. Instead, it was a genuine apology and an acknowledgement of the damage he had caused. Sarah, he wrote, I know I have no right to contact you, and I don't expect you to respond to this letter. I just wanted you to know that prison has given me time to think about the man I became and the choices I made. I destroyed our marriage not because of some flaw in you, but because of my own selfishness and cowardice. I read about your promotion to partner at Richardson and Associates in the Business Journal. I also heard through mutual friends that you remarried. I'm genuinely happy for you, Sarah. You deserved so much better than what I gave you, and I hope you found it. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness or to try to rebuild any kind of relationship. I'm writing because I owe you the truth. You were never the problem. You were strong, intelligent, loving, and loyal. I was the one who was broken, and instead of fixing myself, I tried to break you down to my level. I hope someday I can become the kind of man who deserves the trust of a good woman. But more than that, I hope you never again doubt your own worth, the way I made you doubt it during our marriage. I wish you nothing but happiness in your new life. I read the letter twice, then showed it to Michael. He read it quietly, then looked up at me with concern. How do you feel about this? He asked. Surprised, I said honestly. I never expected him to take real responsibility without trying to manipulate the situation to his advantage. It sounds like prison has actually forced him to confront some hard truths about himself. Are you going to respond? I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. No. I think the kindest thing I can do for both of us is to let sleeping dogs lie. He needs to focus on rebuilding his life without me in it, and I need to focus on the beautiful life I've built without him. Michael nodded, understanding perfectly. One of the things I loved most about him was that he never felt threatened by my past or tried to control how I processed it. He trusted me to handle my own emotional business, which was such a stark contrast to David's constant need to manage and manipulate my feelings. A year later, Richardson & Associates was named one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the region, largely due to the success of deals I had structured and clients I had brought in. Michael and I were featured together on the cover of the business journal as power couples to watch, and the article detailed how our partnership had strengthened both the company and our individual careers. Emma, now 10 years old, had become my shadow, often spending afternoons in my office doing homework while I worked on client presentations. She had started saying she wanted to be a businesswoman when she grew up, just like Sarah. And her pride in my accomplishments filled a space in my heart I hadn't even known was empty. The final chapter in the David saga came 2 years after our wedding, when I was offered a position as Chief Operating Officer at a Fortune 500 company based in New York. The salary was staggering, more money than I had ever imagined making. But it would mean relocating the family and leaving the firm that Michael had built. "Take it," Michael said immediately when I told him about the offer. "This is the opportunity of a lifetime." "But what about your company? What about Emma's school? What about the life we've built here?" Michael smiled and pulled me into his arms. "Sarah, my company is successful enough to run itself, and I can consult from anywhere. Emma's young enough that changing schools won't hurt her. And the life we've built isn't about a place. It's about us choosing each other every day. We can do that in New York just as easily as we can do it here." "Are you sure?" I asked. "This is a huge change." "I'm positive," he said. "I married a woman with unlimited potential, and I want to watch you reach it. Besides," he grinned, "I've always wanted to live in Manhattan." 6 months later, we moved into a penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. Emma enrolled in a prestigious private school where she thrived academically and socially. Michael opened a New York branch of his consulting firm, which immediately attracted high-profile clients impressed by his reputation and his willingness to relocate for his wife's career advancement. And I stepped into my role as COO of a company with annual revenues in the billions, overseeing operations across 3 continents and managing a team of thousands. The girl who had once made herself small to accommodate a cheating husband's ego was now one of the most powerful women in American business. The woman who had been told that advancing her career would hurt her marriage was now married to a man who actively championed her success and made sacrifices to support her ambitions. Sometimes late at night, as I stood on our terrace looking out at the glittering lights of the city, I thought about the different version of myself who might have stayed with David, who might have accepted his affair as something she deserved, who might have spent her whole life wondering what she could have become if she had been braver. But I didn't dwell on those thoughts long. I had learned that the past was only useful as a teacher, not as a destination. David's betrayal had taught me that I was stronger than I knew, that I deserved better than I was accepting, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can become the catalyst for the best thing that ever happens to you. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Emergency board meeting run late. I'll keep dinner warm. Emma wants to show you her science project when you get home. We love you." I smiled and typed back, "On my way home to my real life." Because that's what I had learned, ultimately. The difference between a real life and a performed life, between being loved for who you are and being tolerated for who you pretend to be, between settling for good enough and holding out for everything you deserve. David's affair hadn't just ended my marriage, it had saved my life.